Hi, and welcome to this latest video. As you know, most of my videos involve legal updates, but I've wanted, especially at this time in 2020, to cover some other areas like well-being, personal and business development. And today we're going to look at the subject of leadership, strengths and the growth mindset, which is so important for us as we seek to rebuild our businesses during the pandemic. And today I've got the privilege of being joined by Hannah Miller. Hannah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
It's fantastic. Why don't you tell people a bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay, so I have my own business. My name is Hannah. I live in Birmingham. I have 3 sons who are teenagers or almost teenagers. And my work involves working with leaders, teams and organisations to help them to develop a very strengths-based approach to the way they engage with their people. So it varies from one-to-one coaching all the way through to speaking engagements and any kind of workshop in between. I like to call myself people's secret weapon, and my whole company is around this concept of being other people's sidekick, the idea of helping them become everything they should be, and I'm there to sort of support them in that journey.
Now that's fantastic, and I know you work for a lot for the NHS and other big organisations. I know a lot of your work involves strengths. What is a strength coach? What does that involve? Tell me about that.
Yeah, good question, because it's quite funny. The other day, a neighbour that I've met during COVID who lives further down the street, she was chatting to me and she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I'm actually a strengths coach." And it was quite funny because I was wearing exercise clothes at the time. And she said, "Oh, yes, you look very fit." I said, "Oh, no, I'm not that fit, actually. And that's not what I meant." And so it's very easy for people to misunderstand. So strengths-based development is very much around the philosophy that comes from the work of Don Clifton. He's a psychologist. He was a psychologist, worked very much with the Gallup organisation. And the concept really is about us really understanding what we're naturally talented at. And as we find those things that we're born, the way we think, the way we behave, the way we lead, and the way we get things done, when we know those things, we can begin to intentionally harness those and lead in that way. So it very much counteracts the idea that we should be brilliant at everything. And instead, we learn what we are brilliant at and what we have the potential to be brilliant at, and really intentionally invest in that. So when I work with teams or leaders, we start with this approach of who are you? What are you made for? And therefore, what do you need to be doing more of and leveraging as you sort of go through your career and your personal life and finding your purpose as well. So strengths is this idea that we do need to know our weaknesses. We need to know what we're not, but we need to spend a lot of our time focusing on where we have the most capacity for growth. And that's from our strengths.
No, that's great. I certainly was helped doing the Strengths Finder assessment. It certainly helped me understand myself, and from work to how to survive family holidays. I think knowing my strengths really was helpful in relation to that. No, definitely.
Absolutely true.
In the
Absolutely true.
I put that phrase growth mindset in terms of what we hear a lot about growth mindset. What is a growth mindset, and why is that important to us both in life and in business, particularly at this time?
Yeah, okay, so my history in a previous career was I used to be an assistant head. And one of the things I did a lot was talk about growth mindset to teachers and to different sort of education establishments. And I'm really passionate about it. I found when I understood the theory, it really resonated with me that we need to recognize again that just because we find something challenging to start with, that does not mean we cannot grow and develop. And about grit and resilience being a very important part of recognizing how we grow. So I think sometimes, particularly if you're quite a capable person academically, you may have gone through many years of school where actually you've managed and you've done pretty well. But a day comes for everybody, doesn't it, Adam, where you suddenly think, gosh, this is quite hard. And I think if we've always thought that we shouldn't find things difficult, we then can fall apart in those moments and think, well, I'm no longer capable. I'm no longer any good at this. And I think the work we do with children right through to adults in understanding that the stretch zone, and when we feel stressed, the right level of stress, I mean that in a positive sense, when we feel actually this is asking of us, that's when we really grow and develop as individuals. And as a teacher back in those days, I very much used to say to children, you know, when you feel like that, that means you're growing. If you're not feeling that, actually we're just coasting. And I think sometimes as adults, when we become quite competent and aware of our competency, we stay in that lane and become a little bit comfortable and don't find it so easy to go back into that stretch zone. And quite funny that COVID has actually meant for lots of people that they've had to go back into a stretch zone and realize, oh, this is asking of me, I'm having to grow, I'm having to stretch. So for me, it's not incongruent with the world of strengths. I absolutely believe we need to work on the things we're good at. But even if we take something that we're good at, for example, both you and I work with communication, it's something that we do, we practice and we've grown in. When I do something that's new or fresh or challenging in that world, I go back into that growth. I need to go back into the growth mindset zone and push myself to think, actually, this isn't so easy for me, but I'm going to get better at it. And I love that whole word around grit and resilience, really. And I think that's something we need to be developing and not seeing as a reason to stop or to pull back, but actually to push through that a little bit more.
That's fantastic. I think, what's the question? When was the last time you did something for the first time? And that
It's a
whole
really good question.
of being stretched. And I know with court work, you know, you want the cases that make you nervous. They're nervous because they're challenging,
Yeah.
being stretched. Actually,
you have to be at the top of your game, don't you, when you're feeling stretched? When you're aware that that case is asking a lot of you, it actually sharpens your focus, and you can't do it so on autopilot. You've got to really bring everything that you've got, and that's what a growth mindset encourages to do.
Let me ask you a question I was going to ask you later. I'll ask it now. You talked a bit about grit and resilience.
Yeah.
And I know they have been said by researchers to be one of the sort of key indicators of success. And as a parent, you want to bring it in your children. And as a professional, you want to develop yourself. What are some of the, how do you teach people to develop this grit and resilience you've just talked about?
It's a really good question. I mean, we're parents as well, and we desperately want to see that in our children, don't we? Don't give up, keep going. It's that idea of, you know, nothing that's worth it comes easy. It says on my piano behind here, there's a little frame, and it says, an expert in anything was once a beginner. And for me, that's grit. You know, you don't become an expert if when you're a beginner, you think this means I can't do it anymore. The whole work around grit is about passion and perseverance. So there's two things about grit. We can't have grit for everything because that would be exhausting. You know, I can't give everything the level of grit, but finding something that I'm passionate about and feel a sense of purpose for. So that might be my work. It might be my family. It might be some other cause. What part of your work are you particularly passionate about? Linking that to then the idea of perseverance. I heard somebody say the other day, this is just for free, that perseverance is bravery in slow motion. I thought that was really good. Just a really good way of thinking about it, that we think bravery is always about, you know, the hard thing right now, but actually keeping on, showing up, being persevering, persisting about something is actually quite brave to keep doing when you don't see the outcomes immediately. So it sort of ties again with the idea of marginal gains, that every little bit of grit that we show, that 1%, that's sitting at the piano, playing the same thing, it suddenly becomes better, doesn't it? But it's actually the accumulation of that 100 times you've played that little thing on the piano, the one time eventually you've nailed it. But it was every single one of those that contributed to the nailing. So for me, it's passion and perseverance coming together. But the how we do it is actually quite hard. I think the passion part is important because it means we're not just doing it for reward or recognition. That's part of the grit. It's not just about other people's affirmation. It's about an internal intrinsic motivation. But I think the one thing that I read about it, I thought was quite helpful, both for children, but for any of us. They talk about having the hard thing rule in your family or in your work. So what's the thing that feels like a bit of a hard thing? What's the thing that's pushing you and stretching you? And choosing something that you continue to persevere with, which is your hard thing. So whether that's continue, for me in this season, it's been that I did these daily videos, and actually that was a hard thing. Doing every single day for 34 days was quite an act of perseverance for me. So finding something that's going to cultivate that sense of grit and determination, and also recognizing that when we feel like giving up, that's not an unusual thing. It's not that other people don't have that feeling. It's just that they have a mechanism in that moment to reconnect with their purpose and have the get up and go again. Read a brilliant book. I just want to shout out for a book called Peak Performance. I found it so helpful. I want to read it again. And they talk very much about the connection to purpose, and that when we're doing a hard thing, if we remind ourselves what's our motivation in the first place, is it providing for our family? Is it your care for people who are not getting a fair legal system? Is it that you desperately want to see people grow and develop? That having that purpose front and center is so helpful to developing grit. So it's not about drumming up willpower. I think that's where people misunderstand it. It's much more about that purpose coupled with perseverance. What do you reckon for that for you, Adam, in terms of purpose? I know you're supposed to be asking me, but I'd just be interested to see.
It's definitely. I think I resonate with what you say about intrinsic motivation.
Yes.
You've given a book shout out. Actually, I'm reading a book at the moment called The Art of Resilience about a guy called Ross Edgley who swam around the UK, and he talks a lot about the intrinsic motivation. And I think for me, it's that passion about doing what I do. And being excited about being a lawyer, but also doing training and learning and communicating what I learned to help others. Yeah. But equally doing the hard things to constantly stretch yourself. So you're doing the hard things in terms of stretching yourself with learning how to do a YouTube video and promote that kind of thing. So it's making and I think consistency is such an important thing as well. That constantly as you've done those videos every day, that consistency in doing something every day and consistently showing up. In terms of a lot of people watching will be like lawyers, professionals, business owners. Why is this concept of leadership and growing people's strengths so important at this time?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think we are in, we overusing these words of strange and unprecedented and challenging and uncharted, but we are in a season where we cannot, I think there's been a lot of management that's had to take place just to cope. These things need to be done and be put into place. But an emphasis on leadership as we see ourselves through this season, I think is crucial for a few reasons. One, because we are going to be dealing with some fallouts from this time that's going to need a lot of strategic thought and care, both of those things together. And I also think that engagement is a massive issue anyway in the UK. So what I mean by engagement is how happy people are at work. Happy is a bit of a flimsy word. How engaged are they? How much do they enjoy coming to work? And I actually looked at it for the legal world. It's about 50% of people that are engaged at work. That means 50% are disengaged. That means that they are not as happy as they should be about coming to work. They're not going to be bringing their best. They aren't going to be as profitable or as productive or as efficient or as well as they could be. And I think that number is likely to be going down rather than up as we return to normal. That would be my assumption. Some people will have had a good balance in this time, and other people will be returning exhausted and crushed by personal circumstances. And the evidence suggests that when we build on our strengths and when we build teams on strengths, that actually engagement goes up. That's not something I've made up. That is a global, I can point you to the data. The data shows that when we have 4 engaged members of team to 1 disengaged, they are able to counteract that 1 disengaged person, and that's enough to build the right culture. But if you're at 1-to-1, which it sounds like most law firms are, you cannot build an engaged culture. And we build it effectively by working to people's strengths and positioning them around their meaning, their purpose, and developing and growing them. Those are the key things that impact on engagement. We don't get engaged by large wage packets, actually, and we don't get engaged by just an accolade when we win. Those are tiny parts of what engage us. It's the day in, day out of what's my meaning, who cares about me here, who's developing me, who's growing me, and what I do is making a meaningful difference to the work of my organisation. So that's why I think it's so important for us to be thinking about our leadership, so that when we return, we can work on engagement and we can realise we've got to work harder on this. It's not just about outcomes, but in fact, this does impact on outcomes. Teams are I'll just tell you, they're about 20% more profitable, about another 5% more customer engagement, and another 10% more engaged in their employees. So when we do this, we do make a difference to all those bottom line things as well. That's why.
That's fantastic. And it ties in with a recent interview I did on well-being, and it affects when we focus on strengths of our teams and when we focus on the well-being of our teams, it actually increases the profitability. Sometimes I think business owners at this time may be thinking, oh, this is an area we can cut back on. We're actually, this is an area we want to focus on. I just want to just as we come towards finishing, I just wanted to change the focus to be more practical. How practically can people like me, people who are self-employed, professionals, and then business owners, what are steps practically they can take to develop the things we've talked about, whether it be strengths, whether it be resilience, whether it be this growth mindset? What are some practical things we can factor into our day-to-day to go forward?
Great question. I love to be practical. It's very important that we ground things. Some books that I read that I think are interesting and fascinating, I just think, but tell me what to do. I need to know what to do. So I would really encourage people to actually take their strengths assessment. You can take that at the Gallup website. 25 million people have. You're in good company. Or you can buy the book on Amazon. So I would encourage people to do that. If you don't do that, I would still encourage you to think about, do some reflection of this period and try and discover your strengths through asking a few questions. What do you look forward to? What's exhausting for you? What's the kind of feedback people give you that you do well? What do you want to do again immediately as it's over? So for example, a podcast, as soon as we're finished, I'll think that was great. I'd love to do that all over again. Clues like that can help us see our strengths. Then ask those of the people around you that you lead and work with, do the same thing. Be more curious about what makes people tick and find that out. You can use an assessment, but you don't have to. Ask them about their motivations, their interests, what they particularly enjoy about their job, and begin to position people as much as you can so they get to do more of that or get to do the work in that way. Another thing I'd say is that when you're approaching a challenge or a crisis, just like the one we've just been through, what is your way through? I've been saying this quite a bit during lockdown. The way in, as in the person that you are, what got you to where you are today, is your way through a time of crisis. You and I, Adam, would respond differently to the same crisis because of the people that we are. And sometimes we can look to the left and the right and think, oh, that's what they're doing. That's what I need to do. But what are you made to do? What's your leadership? What's your gifting? What's your strengths? Action plan around that. Using that as intentionally as possible as a way through a crisis and the way through a challenge. That's another practical thing I would say for people to do. I'd also ask people to think about, what is the hard thing that I could be doing a bit more of? Have I got a hard thing at the moment? Is there something that's stretching me that I need to keep tweaking? What's the challenge that I'm making myself develop grit with? And then how can I develop that hard thing idea with the people around me, making sure that the balance is right, that people have their lane and the stuff that they love to do, as well as the thing that feels like the hard thing. I would also say, as another encouragement for people, is to keep giving other people strengths-based feedback. We don't praise as well as we could do. Put myself in that category. We don't praise our children as much as we could. We don't praise our colleagues as much as we could. And I don't mean, again, flimsy praise. I mean telling somebody specifically what they do well. When you speak, this is how it impacts people. When you lead, this is what it looks like. So make an action to say, every day I'm going to think of somebody that I can give some of that kind of feedback and praise to, that's specific and helpful and forward focused. I also think people could be doing, look at the Gallup podcast. That's another really good podcast people can learn more from. So lots of practical tips, hopefully, there that people can take away and think, going to push into that.
No, that's fantastic. And I love the idea of what's your hard thing, what's your challenging thing. Yes. Everybody's got something that's stretching them on a daily basis, which they're growing and stretching in. That's fantastic. Hannah, in terms of you personally, how do people contact you? What services can you offer? And what particularly are you offering at this time during lockdown?
Okay, so the sort of different services I offer is either one-to-one coaching for leaders or people who are looking to or career adjustment or development or wanting to grow their leadership. People can have a one-off or they can have a set of 3. I'm doing loads of that online at the moment. Really interesting, Adam. There's a lot of people asking the purpose question at the moment that have been in touch with me. So I do a lot of that. I also do team-based workshops and webinars. In lockdown, they're all obviously online, but I also do them in people's workplaces when they want them, or come and talk more speaking and motivationally around these kind of issues of leadership. So there's sort of the one-to-ones, the workshops and webinars, and then sort of more larger speaking engagements are the different things that I get involved with. I do also get involved with engagement, so I can help people to assess what engagement looks like in their workplace. If they want some real hard facts about how engaged their workplace are, I can support an organisation through that process. I love doing that. I love having some data to work with, and then encourage people to think this is what we need to do differently. In terms of getting in touch with me, my company, this is slightly complicated because Adam knows this, we've discussed it. My company is called Miller and Moore, but we are going through a rebrand. Everything is now called Sidekick. My website will be ready any day now. But in terms of social media, I use all the channels. I try to be quite active on there, and lots of my content is on there. Also, like a weekly sort of newsletter, which is not just my thoughts, but I try to get some of the best things from around the internet and other people's minds around leadership, and give people links to that. So I'd love people to get involved in that way if they'd like to. I try to be as communicative as I can, because that's my strengths. So people can just reach out in any of those ways to me. It's Hannah Lou Miller on Instagram, and on Twitter it's Hello Sidekick. So hopefully people can find me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What I'll do, Hannah, I'll put the contact details below the video so people can get in touch with you and see what you offer and sign up for your newsletter. Well, Hannah, thank you so much for speaking to me today. I think everybody's going to go away and think, right, what's the challenging thing that I have in my life at the moment? That's a good takeaway in order for people to stretch themselves. But thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really great, and hopefully we can catch up in person soon.
Love to. Thank you so much.
All the best. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you.